Hi guys, so today I'll be speaking with Catriona Battensby. She's graduated from Grey School of Art and has done fashion and textiles for 4 years. So we'll be talking about her exhibition work and many other projects in the future.
What would be your biggest inspiration to your exhibition work?
I think the biggest inspiration for my exhibition work this year was, it's all based around space exploration. It's informed by historic space travel, astronauts, protective gear, things you can see through a telescope, images from the Hubble telescope. I've always been interested in space. To be fair, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be an astrophysicist before I went to uni for fashion, but maths and physics are hard, so I didn't go down that route. So I've always been interested, and I thought, usually in fashion and textiles, each semester you pick a different project, but for fourth year, your project goes across both semesters. So I knew I had to choose something that I was interested in that would keep me going for a while. So I went with something I already knew a bit about and thought, there's a lot to this topic. Surely I won't run out of things.
What would be your favourite research you've done for your exhibition?
I think one of the more exciting things I got to do was at the start of the year. Obviously I can't go to space or anything like that, and we don't have any like rocket ships or anything near us. So I was looking into just general air travel because a lot of my project was based around protective gear that they give to pilots. And I was lucky enough to go and see a helicopter pilot, and he gave me a big tour of some of the helicopters that they take the guys out to the rigs with. And I was sitting in this helicopter, and you see them from afar and you think, well, they must be small, but it's because they're far away. And this thing was huge, and the front where the two pilots sit, there was just buttons everywhere. Everything was labeled with letters, and I'm like, how do you get anywhere? This is so confusing. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, you know what, I'm probably never going to be sitting in this position again. This is such a cool experience to be able to come across, take pictures of the pilot's protective gear, which was really informative to my fashion designs. It gave me lots of ideas, especially because the pilots and the astronauts are similar in the way, especially in space, you can't really have things flying about, getting like jammed in between things, because obviously that's not safe. So they just have like pockets specifically designed for pens. Everything's got Velcro on it so you can stick it to something. Like everything has a purpose for safety.
See, for your work, is it normally, would you have produced one of your clothings, if that makes sense? Like one of your would you have like made a model of it instead of it being on paper? Like, I'm not sure how it works.
Yeah, so usually what happens is, since I'm fashion and textiles, we do 3 full looks, which would have been shown at our graduate catwalk fashion show. Obviously that didn't go ahead. And if you're fashion design, you have 6 looks. But because of the circumstances, everyone kind of got doubled up. So I had to do 6 looks instead. But originally we would have been sewing and making those things. They would have been real. But obviously I don't have the facilities at home to be able to do such a grand scale. But
how did you create your patterns? Because I've seen that you had like a lot of different ones. How did you create that? Did you do it on the computer, or did you do it and then scan it in, or it's just whatever process, you know?
So since I do print, I went through quite the process for my prints. Obviously it was over a whole year, so I had plenty of time to experiment. I basically started off, my original ideas for my prints was I was going to do long exposures of lights and stars and things like that. And I quickly came to the conclusion that I hated it, so I had to pick up something else instead. So I would just go down to the print room, screen print, just odds and ends till I came up with something. And I was trying to explore most of the techniques that I hadn't done before. And one of them was, you can basically get an image and you turn it into bitmap, which is loads of tiny dots, and it screen prints basically perfectly and it looks like an image. So that's the first thing I did with, I believe it was illustrations of the moon from an old French book I found in the British Library. And that turned out great. It wasn't my image, obviously, so I was like, well, we'll need to go take some images. So I went and was thinking along the lines of like planetary terrain, you know, like the surfaces of things. So I was taking pictures, close-up pictures of just weird objects to get different textures and things. And I started turning these into prints. These were all black and white though, and I usually always work in big colors, and I had all this black and white stuff, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, it looks fine, but I'm not here for the black and white. So I was looking into images on NASA, and they had these pictures from the Phoenix mission to Mars. I think it was one of the first ones onto Mars. And for some reason, I never looked into it, I probably should have. All of these images had a slight like blur to them, and they were red and blue, and I was like, oh, those colors look pretty good. They were quite digital colors, but I also work quite digitally as well, so I thought we'll give it a go. So I started working with spots in blue and red, and that went well for a while, and then I just started adding in more colors, more spots. And by this point, I was trying to screen print all these colors at once, and it was getting a bit too much. There was too many colors going on. And for time and money, I decided I was going to end up digitally printing. So I just started doing everything on Photoshop, on Illustrator, like chopping and changing, zooming in, getting different scales. I would print out big A3 pieces of paper and stick them together so I could see what my fabric would look like if I bought like a meter or something like that. And I would stick them up on the wall, see if it was any good, take it back down and try again. And yeah, it was just a lot of trial and error, a lot of spots, a lot of colors.
As well, you were saying you used a lot of different techniques. What would be your favourite technique that you've used?
Oh, I don't know. I love screen printing so much. When I went to uni, I didn't even know, this is so embarrassing, I didn't even know it was part of the course. I just thought fashion and textiles, I don't know what I thought the textiles part was, to be honest. I was completely delusional. I think one of my favorite things I did try out was I have this fabric, like this thin, it's almost like a waterproof jacket. It's got that kind of like soft waterproof texture to it, but it was see-through. And I had a big challenge trying to figure out how I was going to print on it. We have loads of different print pastes. You've got different dyes like Procyan acid, disperse, which all work for different fabrics. So for this particular fabric, I needed to use disperse, and I had so much trouble with this fabric. But even when it didn't turn out how it was supposed to, it always looked kind of cool because you could see through it. And I mean, I never went followed through with it because it was just too tricky to work with. But I did have a lot of fun using the disperse print paste on that strange fabric.
Do you prefer researching? Well, did you prefer the Mars photos or the moon surface photos? Like, what did you work best with?
I think I'd probably have to say the moon terrains I find most interesting, especially because when I was looking at the images, I was like, these just look like, you know, when the sand goes out on the beach and it's still kind of wet and sometimes like bubbles and stuff, and I was like, it looks exactly the same. Like, how strange is that? That's something that like not on this earth looks exactly the same. And I think a lot of things I found really strange about looking at these images is like, obviously Mars is literally out of this world, and you could find like a similar texture to Mars, like out in the desert or like a rocky terrain or something like that.
Did you find it difficult to work in the current circumstances of COVID-19 while you were doing your work, or?
I mean, the transition from going to the studio to working by myself at home was rubbish, because my studio, all the girls in fashion and textiles were all just the best of pals. And every day I would go in and everyone would be there. It would be just a great day every day. If anyone was ever sad, like, we'd pick each other up. Like, there was never a problem because we were always there for each other. And it was just like a community thing. And at the time when we got thrown out of the studio, we were due to be sewing one of our first looks to take a photo shoot for the lookbook for the fashion show. So my mindset at the time was like, I just need to sew, because like, what if this ends up happening? I don't know why I thought that, but you know, you have to have hope sometimes. And when I came back here, luckily I have like loads of space. I've got a huge desk here. I've got everything I need for being at home. But after our requirements were released and you saw everything they had to cut and like change, it was quite upsetting because you kind of felt like, oh, like all my dreams, they've been crushed. This is rubbish. But in the grand scheme of things, I do think I potentially have come out with a lot better work than I may have if I was at uni. So, I mean, obviously the situation's rubbish, but I guess I should be thankful for it in some way.
Would you ever go back to your work? Like you were saying you were going to start sewing, would you go back and want to recreate one of your pieces, or would you just kind of want to move on and do something else?
I mean, I have before, since we were due to be sewing, I have a big length of fabric over there with one of my designs on it that I got printed. So I basically have nothing to do with it now. So I think I would consider maybe making one of the looks, but then I need a lot of the facilities that are back at uni, and then like I'm probably not going to go back to uni other than to return this guy. I don't know if I would ever. I feel like I really enjoyed working with my prints, and I would maybe revisit them, but maybe not in the same way. I suppose they would still be under the same theme. It would still be the spots, it would still be the colours, and see where that would take me. But I don't know if I would ever get round to actually sewing any of my garments because I just don't have the facilities to be able to.
Do you have any future projects soon, or are you just gonna kind of work on other stuff, or have you got a project planned at all?
I'm not quite sure what I want to do at the moment. I think over this summer, I was wanting to do a load of workshops to fill in the little gaps for my screen printing stuff, maybe working on paper and things like that, just so I can cover all the bases. So I think maybe my first priority would be try get into a workshop somewhere and learn these things that I wasn't able to, because I could have potentially been able to pick up this knowledge towards the end of the year, but obviously we're not in Grays, so I think that would probably be what I would want to do next, because I'm very missing the screen printing. I go back on my camera roll all the time and look at all the fun times I had, and I'm like, oh, it's so sad.